So one of the main issues that relates to the parak that we're learning, which deals with Ashava Saveda, returning lost property, is the concept of Yeush, meaning later on we're going to learn that we are required to return a lost item as long as there is a person who is claiming it, who is looking for the item. The owner is still hoping to get his lost property back. However, once the owner loses hope, he abandons the property, then there's no longer a mitzvah to return the item, simply because once the owner gives up hope, that means that the property is abandoned, is no longer his. And therefore the Torah put a limit on how long does the finder have to try to return the lost item. He only has to try as long as it's reasonable to assume that the owner is still looking for his property. But once the finder has a reason to believe that the owner is no longer looking for the property, that is, he abandoned the property, then the finder is allowed to keep the item that he found. And this is called Yeush. Yeush means to abandon the property, and he abandons the property again because he loses hope of ever recovering the property. Earlier in the Gemara we learned that one can make an educated guess, a logical assumption, that the owner gave up hope. For example, if the finder sees some leftover grain in the threshing floor, in the threshing place, and the amount that he finds is not enough to justify the owner coming back, that is, it's not worthwhile for the owner to come back from his house to the threshing place to pick up a little bit of grain, then the finder can assume that the owner gave up hope of getting the grain, he abandoned the grain, and therefore in such a case, the finder will be allowed to keep that grain. That's one of the ways that the finder can make a logical assumption that the owner gave up hope. In this unit of Gemara, we're going to see that there's other ways that enable the finder to make such an assumption. So usually, a case involving finding lost property follows this storyline. That is, first the item was lost. Then the owner, after a short while, realizes that the item is missing. And then he spends some time looking for the item, trying to figure out where it is. But after a while, the owner gives up hope. That is, he abandons the item. Then later, when somebody finds the item after the owner gave up hope, then the item has been abandoned, is ownerless. Therefore, the finder is allowed to keep the item in such a case. The important thing here is to realize that the item was found after the owner gave up hope. And that's the key, because once he gives up hope, as we mentioned before, he abandons the property, and therefore the property becomes ownerless and anybody can keep it. The question then becomes the following. What happens if the order is changed? It's changed in the following manner. The item is lost, but then soon after the item is lost, somebody finds the item, and only after the finder picks up the item does the owner realize that the item is missing, and after he realizes, he goes ahead and gives up hope. So if you notice, here this case is different, because somebody found the item before the owner realizes that the item is missing. In other words, when this finder picked up the item, the owner didn't do Yeush yet. He did not disown, he did not abandon the property. And now the issue is the finder allowed to keep the item before the owner actually gives up hope? What is the reason for that? So on the one hand, you could say that since this individual found the item before the owner gave up hope, so he should not be able to keep it, because truthfully, the item still belongs to the owner until he gives up hope. That's one way of looking at it. But on the other hand, we know that if the item didn't have a siman, if the owner knows that he's not going to be able to claim the item because he can't identify it, he cannot prove that it's his. So even though he has not really given up hope now, but it's only a matter of time, you know that the expected reaction of the owner is, when he finds out that the item is missing, of course he's going to give up hope. So even though he has not given up hope in stage number 2, but he certainly will give up hope. So the Gemara will explain that there is in reality 3 scenarios, 3 applications of this question. The first one is if the item that was lost does not have a siman, does not have a sign. In that case, there is a debate. On the one hand, as we mentioned before, the owner has not given up hope yet, because that happens here in stage number 4. And therefore, when the finder picked up the item still belongs to the owner. But on the other hand, we can argue, as we just mentioned before, that since the item does not have a siman, the owner is certainly going to give up hope. That's a matter of time. Of course he'll give up hope. So therefore, looking at it that way, you could argue that the finder should be able to keep it. However, let's say that the item that was lost has a siman. So if this individual found the item, and let's say it's a wallet, like the mentioned before, that a wallet is something that has a siman, or it's a watch, it's a phone. So in that case, everybody would agree that the finder cannot keep the item, because since the item has a siman, the expected reaction of the owner is he's not going to give up hope. Since he has a siman on the item, he will say, listen, somebody will post a sign and I'll be able to recover my item. I'll give it the siman, and prove that it is mine. And therefore, he's not expected to give up hope. And therefore, if the finder picks up an item that has a siman, so he cannot keep it. That everybody agrees that he has to announce it. Because again, Yeush is not expected. Giving up hope is not likely in such a case. Now the Gemara brings up another case, a very different case, and that is, suppose that a person is walking by a river that is about to get flooded, or by the seashore, and the tide is about to rise, and there's an item there, there's a radio there, there is some money there, something that's going to get damaged by the water. Well, if you don't pick it up, if the finder doesn't pick it up, then you're assured that that item is going to be gone, it's going to be damaged, it's going to be destroyed. Nobody will be able to keep it. Nobody will be able to recover it. So in that case, everybody agrees that even though the item was found before the owner gave up hope, but since you picked up an item that was about to be destroyed from the world, everybody was going to lose access to the item. Everybody agrees that in that case, you can certainly keep the item. So to summarize, we're going to see that there's 3 different cases. The first case is davar sheyesh bo siman. If there is a siman, if there is a sign that can be used to identify the item, then both Abai and Rav are going to agree that he must announce the item. The reason that they agree is because the expected reaction of the owner is he's not going to give up hope. Therefore, since the finder picked up the item before the owner gave up hope, and he's not expected to give up hope, everybody agrees that in such a type of an item, the finder must announce the object. Now, the next case is the following. Suppose that the item was in the Bezuto Shel Yam, which is by the seashore where the tide is going to rise, or Beshliluto Shel Nahar, by the bank of the river. Then Abai and Rava both agree that he can keep the item, even if he has a siman, because the item is about to be destroyed. So in effect, the finder rescued the item, and in such a case, there is no mitzvah. You're not required by the Torah to return the item. So far we have looked at 2 cases. In the first case, they both agree, Abai and Rava agree that the finder must announce the item. In the second case, both Abaye and Rava agree that the finder may keep the item. The debate is regarding the third case. The third case is the following. What happens if the item does not have a siman? So Abaye says that the finder must announce it because the finder picked up the item before the owner gave up hope. And Rava says that Areilu Shelo, the finder is allowed to keep it because even though the owner did not give up hope, but since the item does not have a siman, the expected reaction is that he will give up hope. That's almost a guarantee that he will. And therefore, Rava allows the finder to keep it.